We open at the Air Force Research Laboratory Gamma Base, situated in the barren expanse, roughly 25 miles southeast of Las Cruces, New Mexico. It is moments before a historic weapons test, T-minus 2 minutes until detonation of Gamma Bomb Test A. A calm, almost clinical monologue from Bruce Banner overlays the scene as the camera sweeps across the facility and surrounding desert. Everything about the environment signals ideal testing conditions, controlled, predictable, perfectly ordinary. Precisely what Banner had hoped for. As his thoughts guide us, the supposed marvel of the device is described, a superweapon ironically referred to as the Gamma Bomb. He contemplates its duality, the idea that something so devastating can possess a strange scientific elegance. It is engineered to release an immense, concentrated blast of gamma radiation, energy at a magnitude typically reached only through nuclear fission or fusion, yet without relying on either. Its destructive force is derived solely from radioactive decay. In theory, it provides the terrifying power of a nuclear weapon while avoiding the catastrophic fallout associated with traditional atomic arms. It is, in Bruce's idealistic hope, a way to end the specter of nuclear annihilation forever, to remove the global threat of mutually assured destruction. This goal has driven him since childhood, since the moment he learned what nuclear war meant and imagined a world spared from it. Inside the base, Bruce Banner prepares for the inaugural test of his creation, the culmination of years of work and a lifetime of purpose. He is absorbing the gravity of how close he has come to achieving his lifelong dream, just one successful ignition away. Suddenly, a car tears across the desert perimeter, wildly out of place against the precision and order of the military installation. It barrels toward the base at reckless speed, ultimately losing control and smashing into a light pole. Bruce lifts a pair of binoculars and peers through them toward the crash site. Through the lenses, he spots a young man, Rick Jones, climbing from the vehicle. Bruce doesn't yet know who he is, just sees a teenage troublemaker, a stray, someone without guidance or ties, an orphan who somehow wandered into the most dangerous place on the planet at the worst possible moment. Bruce's instincts override procedure. The Gamma Bomb test sequence is fully automated now, past the fail-safe cutoff. There's no stopping the countdown. If the boy remains where he is, he will be vaporized instantly. Bruce knows the cost. He understands that running toward him is almost certainly a death sentence. He does not hesitate. He bolts from the observation bunker, sprinting across the base toward the unwitting intruder, driven solely by the urgent need to save him. Bruce notices Rick in danger, pushes him into a trench shielded with lead lining, and is then caught fully exposed in the explosion, his body flooded with gamma radiation. The narrative hard cuts. Days have passed. In the interrogation room at Gamma Base, Bruce is seated across from Blonsky, who interrupts him before he can finish explaining what happened during the Gamma Bomb test. Blonsky identifies the intruder as Richard Jones, Rick, and emphasizes that Bruce should have known his name. Bruce maintains that he didn't know him, describing Rick as a gang-affiliated troublemaker he has no connection to. Blonsky explains that Rick is currently detained and being interrogated by Homeland Security for breaching a secure military testing facility. He then suggests that Bruce may have orchestrated the incident with Rick, implying collusion. While saying this, he reviews Rick's file, clearly implying that Bruce is hiding something. Bruce rejects the accusation, asking why he would sabotage his own test. Blonsky responds with increasing hostility. He angrily points out that Bruce created a device designed to produce deadly gamma energy without actually killing. He emphasizes that Bruce was standing directly within the blast radius during detonation. Blonsky remarks that Bruce appears not only unharmed, but healthier than before, demanding an explanation for why Bruce is alive and unaffected. Bruce is unable to provide any explanation. Blonsky presses further, making it clear that Bruce must convince him. He states that his decision will determine whether Bruce avoids prison after spending billions in government funding on a supposedly effective weapons platform that failed in its intended function. Bruce corrects the actual financial total, stating it was $13.6 billion once the additional factors are included. Blonsky dismisses the correction and states that he does not believe Bruce's account. He asks why Bruce chose to personally intervene to save Rick rather than allowing the military police to handle the situation, framing Bruce's actions as suspicious rather than heroic. We abruptly transition to a childhood memory. Bruce as a young boy, witnessing his father take his mother's life. In the aftermath, Brian Banner warns him, forcefully impressing upon him that he must never speak of what he witnessed. He insists Bruce bury the memory so deeply that he can never reach it again, because revealing the truth would have consequences. We return to the present. Bruce admits that he has always had a visceral instinct to protect children, that trauma from his youth shaped him. The sight of a child in danger is something he simply cannot tolerate. Blonsky mocks the sentiment as sentimental weakness, preparing to dismiss it. Bruce pushes back, not with anger, but with desperation. He wanted the experiment to succeed, even if that meant his death. He confesses genuine disappointment that the resulting blast did not kill him. He emphasizes the impossibility of his survival. By all logical scientific reasoning, he should not be alive. His continued existence feels inexplicable, almost unjust. He concludes that if he lived through something that should have obliterated him, then there must be a purpose behind it, some reason he was spared. He leaves the interrogation room. Outside in the hallway stands Lieutenant Betty Ross, chief of the Gamma Base Military Police. She asks how the session went. Bruce replies uncertainly, half joking. He won't truly know until her security forces burst into his quarters to arrest him. He remarks he would have preferred it if she had handled the questioning herself. She notes he probably has multiple reasons for wanting that. He acknowledges the implication, but then shifts focus, expressing confusion over why an external investigator needed to be flown in from Quantico. Betty clarifies. Her authority covers internal security at Gamma. Major Talbot's style is more aligned with ideological enforcement. Bruce laments his inability to provide anything useful to investigators. Betty replies that she can still make use of him. She asks whether medical staff cleared him for duty. He confirms they have, emphatically. She tells him to drop the smile. Her interest in him is strictly professional. She needs his intellect. Bruce plays along, disappointed. A brief deadpan joke about dashed hopes. Betty asks whether Bruce has heard the circulating stories. She hands him a file as she speaks. Bruce plays ignorant, though he clearly knows the rumors well. He refers to the strange nighttime intrusions, the unexplained destruction, the corporal confined to psychiatric observation after claiming he witnessed an enormous green creature demolish the particle accelerator complex. He feigns disbelief, pretending none of this has reached his ears. Betty explains the situation regardless. The crucial point, she says, is that her father remains unaware of the reports, giving her a window to resolve the problem before he returns from Washington. Her team has dubbed the mysterious figure the Hulk, and she intends to track it down and neutralize the threat, whatever its true form. She notes that every site hit by this unknown force has registered significant radiation readings, a detail withheld from the public and most personnel. Bruce asks whether there have been any new incidents in the past week. His tone reveals he already knows the answer. She comments on how impressively informed the rumor network is, then adds that despite the lull, she has implemented expanded security measures, additional patrol units, motion detection systems, surveillance equipment, preparing for the possibility of another intrusion. She invites Bruce to assist her, suggesting he join her for late-night security rounds. Bruce hesitates. He politely declines, saying his nighttime hours are already committed elsewhere. Betty interprets it as his having a romantic engagement. He tries to deny it, flustered, but she brushes it off with a light, knowing remark. She tells him to pass along her regards to this imagined person, then notes he must be keeping himself warmer at night than she is. Desert evenings can be bitterly cold. She walks off, leaving Bruce standing alone in quiet reflection. Betty Ross sits alone at Stubbs' Roadhouse, a drink in hand. Emil Blonsky steps inside and notices her. He approaches, making a mock formal remark about being astonished to find an officer of her stature unaccompanied in a bar full of eligible American men. Betty answers bluntly, suggesting he considers she might be there intentionally alone. Blonsky claims he thought about that, dismissed it, and concluded no one chooses solitude in a bar this close to their post unless something is on their mind. He teases her about previously seeming attracted to Bruce. Betty admits she briefly thought there might be something there, but that moment has passed. Blonsky asserts that Bruce is troubled where she's concerned. Betty fires back with a warning. If he's trying to flirt, quoting her father is the worst possible opening move. Blonsky plays coy, asking whether he is in fact flirting and whether it's working. Betty deflects and asks him instead what his deductive genius has turned up about Bruce. He states his conclusion plainly. Bruce is concealing something. Sooner or later, he'll uncover it. When he does, the truth behind the gamma bomb failure will come out, and Bruce will pay dearly for it. He believes this with certainty because, as he puts it, deception recognizes deception. Betty asks whether she'll ever get a glimpse of his hidden nature. Blonsky replies that such a reveal would demand trust, something not easily given. Their exchange is interrupted by the arrival of Kate Waynesboro, a S.H.I.E.L.D. operative. Kate approaches Betty, seeking information about Bruce. Betty shuts her down and dismisses her without cooperation. Kate then steps aside, phones Nick Fury, and reports that Betty refused to talk. Fury tells her it doesn't matter and instructs her to return to headquarters. Bruce Banner drives through the desert night. The vast landscape is silent, bathed in pale moonlight. He parks near the cold fusion fuel rod laboratory, the site tied to his past catastrophe. He begins a new entry in his personal record, Gamma Bomb Survivor's Log, Day 12 since exposure. His thoughts are calm, but heavy with resignation. He knows what he's about to do will be painful, yet he sees no other option. He administers an injection. Previous tests on his skin, blood, and hair have yielded nothing. Despite radiation exposure exceeding the combined intensities of Hiroshima, 3 Mile Island, and Chernobyl, his bone marrow reveals no change in lymphocyte levels. Yet his physiology and psyche have altered beyond recognition. He still has no understanding of why his transformations only happen at night. He speculates that it could be linked to the decrease in atmospheric Compton scattering once the Earth shields itself from the sun. Perhaps, somehow, the fallen visible light triggers his metamorphosis, even though cosmic gamma radiation permeates space at all hours. He stands before the security panel and activates the system using his voice. The automated system recognizes his vocal signature and initiates the containment sequence. The heavy, reinforced door slides open, then closes behind him once he steps inside. The computer states that the containment protocol will remain in effect until sunrise at 6:47 a.m., meaning the room will not unlock under any circumstances until that time. Bruce is now alone in the sealed chamber. He knows what is coming and braces for it. His breathing grows heavier, his muscles tense, and the transformation begins to take hold. His body changes rapidly and violently as he becomes the Hulk. Once the transformation is complete, the Hulk immediately reacts to being confined. He throws himself against the containment door, pounding on it with tremendous force. He demands freedom, furious at being trapped, and continues striking the thick metal barrier in an attempt to break through. Meanwhile, at the Gamma Base Central Security, Blonsky and Betty's response to the disturbance symbolizes the external world's fear of what Bruce embodies. To them, it's a threat, a target, a phenomenon to be subdued. Betty and her team of soldiers arrive at the cold fusion fuel rod lab facility, finding it completely demolished. As the team puts on their night vision goggles, the soldiers take position and prepare to fire at a shadowy figure in the distance. They open fire, and the creature collapses, apparently dead. When they approach, the figure is revealed to be an ape, one that's been exposed to gamma radiation. A soldier breaks the uneasy silence, questioning if this is truly the creature everyone has been hunting. Blonsky notices the tag on its ear and realizes it's one of the chimps used in the original gamma bomb tests. Betty, faced with the implications, admits that she now has no choice but to inform her father. The existence of this creature means there could be others. Before they can act, chaos erupts. One of the soldiers is dragged into the shadows and violently thrown aside. The real Hulk has emerged. The team opens fire, flash grenades burst, but nothing slows the monster down. Betty moves to higher ground to get a clearer line of sight, while below, her soldiers are quickly overpowered. Blonsky watches as the Hulk turns to leave the ruins of the facility. Driven by adrenaline and defiance, he fires round after round into the creature's back, bullets that have no effect. As he reloads, Hulk turns toward him, enraged. From her vantage point, Betty finally sees the creature clearly for the first time, the raw, impossible presence of him. The Hulk's furious roar fills the night as he escapes into the desert darkness, leaving Betty staring after him, stunned by what she's witnessed. At dawn, the desert stretches endlessly beneath a rising sun, the light spilling over the red cliffs and vast dunes of New Mexico. The Hulk moves through it, bounding across the open landscape in enormous, effortless leaps. For the first time since his creation, there is no threat, no noise of pursuit, only the sound of the wind rushing through his hair and the steady rhythm of his landing. He pauses at the crest of a canyon ridge, the world silent around him. Sitting on a rock, he seems almost calm, gazing across the expanse. A rabbit emerges from behind a rock, nose twitching. The Hulk stays perfectly still, watching it. The rabbit hops closer, unafraid now. The Hulk extends one massive finger, and the rabbit sniffs it cautiously before hopping away. The Hulk watches it go, something like wonder in his expression. The scene shifts to the Otero County Processing Center. Fluorescent lights buzz faintly as a guard returns Rick Jones's belongings across a steel counter. A worn Skull and Crossbones wallet with his driver's license and $14.57 in cash, a small Swiss Army knife with a spork attachment, and a dented harmonica. The list is recited like a ritual. The guard offers a mock-polite farewell, indifferent to the young man's resentment. Rick, tired and bruised by the whole ordeal, mutters an insult under his breath as he pockets his things and heads for the exit. Later that day, on the quiet streets of El Paso, Rick meets up with the wrecking crew, rough, imposing men who carry themselves like they own every alley. Rick tells them he's done. He doesn't want to be part of their world anymore, wants nothing to do with whatever schemes or debts they think bind him. But the crew laughs off his defiance. To them, he's still one of theirs, and he still owes them. Their tone turns menacing, their words hard and mocking. When he tries to walk away, they grab him. The confrontation escalates until they shove him to the ground, hitting him, kicking him. Rick tries to cover himself, to fight back, but there are too many. Bruce is in El Paso, a large enough city that he can blend in and remain unnoticed. He's been living with extreme caution and anonymity. He uses only cash, leaves no digital or paper trace, and constantly relocates to avoid detection. Bruce sees Rick Jones, the young man he once saved, being threatened and harassed by members of the wrecking crew. Bruce intervenes, attempting to get them to leave Rick alone. However, one of the gang members shoves Bruce to the ground. The sudden aggression triggers something immediate and uncontrollable. The anger rises sharply, and Bruce begins to transform. Not gradually, but in a surge of rage, with the change into the Hulk overtaking him almost instantly. He towers over the gang, and though he speaks few words, his intent is unmistakable. He despises bullies. The wrecking crew, panicked, rushes him with crowbars and chains, but it's useless. The Hulk barely seems to notice the blows. One by one, he swats them aside, sending bodies flying into the walls and pavement. Within moments, the fight is over. Rick looks up at the Hulk, his fear mixing with a dawning recognition. He expects the creature to attack him next, but instead, the Hulk stands still, his breathing heavy and uneven, as though he is struggling to make a decision. The tension holds for several moments before the creature's demeanor shifts. His fury seems to fade, and he takes a slow step forward. Rick instinctively moves back, unsure of what will happen next. In that moment of hesitation, Rick begins to sense something familiar. He remembers the man who saved him during the bomb test, the scientist who risked his life to throw him into safety. The memory of that man's face, filled with fear and resolve, merges with the image before him. Beneath the layers of green skin and muscle, the same person exists. The realization hits him with shock and disbelief. Rick, still aching from the beating he took, pushes himself upright, grimacing in pain. He reflects aloud that the Hulk has once again saved his life, putting them out of balance, that he owes him now. The Hulk responds in a deep, harsh tone, rejecting the idea of equality or repayment. To him, what has happened between them can never be evened out. Rick studies the creature more closely, seeing the sorrow and conflict hidden beneath the monstrous form. He points out that the Hulk isn't really the villain he pretends to be, that both of them share the same struggle of trying to convince themselves they are worse than they truly are. The comment touches a nerve. The Hulk erupts in anger at the mention of Bruce's name, shouting in denial, refusing the identity that links him to the man who created him. Rick, startled, raises his hands in surrender and quickly concedes the point, assuring that he will not mention it again. The Hulk's transformation suddenly reverses, and the giant form collapses back down into Bruce Banner, who is left trembling and struggling for breath in torn clothing. Rick reacts with shock, realizing that it truly is Bruce. Bruce, exhausted and frightened, tells Rick that he must forget everything he has seen and forget Bruce as well, because the military may already be searching for him. Rick asks where Bruce intends to go. Bruce admits that he has no plan, simply that he needs to disappear anywhere as long as it is away from here. He is unsteady and nearly collapses, and Rick moves to support him. Rick tells him he needs rest and help. After a moment of thinking, Rick decides to take him to a place he knows, a FEMA trailer on the outskirts of town, nothing elaborate, but isolated and untraceable. He invites Bruce to come with him. Bruce questions why Rick would help him. Rick reflects and decides that Bruce has saved his life twice now, which means Rick feels he owes him something in return. In addition, Rick acknowledges that the two of them are alike in a meaningful way, both of them running from something they cannot escape. General Thaddeus Thunderbolt Ross arrives back at Gamma Base, stepping off the helicopter onto the landing pad. Betty is waiting and greets him formally, offering a salute. Ross acknowledges her and immediately heads toward the command center, with Betty accompanying him. He refers to her report, stating that it mentioned a security breach and demands a full briefing. Betty agrees, but indicates that the situation is not straightforward. Ross orders her to make it straightforward. Betty prepares herself and explains that the gamma bomb test did more than simply fail. It resulted in the creation of new entities. She reports evidence of test animals that have undergone gamma mutation, and something else beyond them, something larger and unknown. Ross halts upon hearing this and instructs her to show him. The briefing room is filled to capacity. Betty's security officers, Blonsky, several base commanders, and General Ross presiding at the head of the table. Screens display images and surveillance footage from the damaged cold fusion facility. Betty walks the room through the evidence, explaining that the building sustained catastrophic internal destruction and that radiation levels recorded at the site remain extraordinarily high. Among the collected data is a night vision still that clearly captures the transformed figure responsible. The Hulk, mid-roar, unmistakably powerful and enraged. Ross studies the image and identifies the figure as Bruce Banner. Shock ripples through the room as personnel react, stunned at the implication that the scientist they worked with and trusted has become the creature causing the destruction. Betty restores order and explains that the gamma detonation did not simply expose Bruce, but altered him fundamentally. The transformation appears linked to darkness or stress, and in that state he exhibits immense physical power and overwhelming emotional aggression. Blonsky adds that the destruction was deliberate in force and scale, Bruce, in his altered form, overpowered an entire trained response unit without encountering real resistance. Ross responds with controlled severity. He demands that Bruce be found immediately and declares him a fugitive and a danger to national security. Ross then expands upon the situation, revealing information that many in the room were not previously aware of. The Gamma Bomb Project was never only a weapons initiative. It was part of a classified attempt to replicate the World War II Super Soldier program, an effort to recreate enhanced human capability. Bruce's research was built on those foundations. The creature now known as the Hulk is not just the result of an accident, but the unintended outcome of that legacy. The room reacts with deeper shock. The personnel now understand that the figure they saw is both the product of classified national ambition and the catastrophic failure of that ambition. Ross concludes with a tone that carries more than professional urgency. It carries personal investment. His words communicate that Bruce is not simply a threat to public safety, but a reminder of failed control, broken trust, and consequences that reach far beyond the laboratory. Betty senses this weight and feels unsettled, realizing that her father's pursuit of Bruce is driven by something more than duty. At Rick's FEMA trailer, Bruce explains that he needs to find a way to undo what has happened to him, to cure the Hulk. Rick, in response, shares the circumstances that led him to the base. He reveals that after leaving the foster system, he fell in with the Wrecking Crew, a gang that pressured him into doing things he did not want to do. He believed that breaking into Gamma Base would prove something about his courage and allow him to avoid being forced into those other acts. Bruce forgives him, acknowledging it was not Rick's fault. Later, after Bruce forgives Rick for his role in the events at the base, he begins working on a possible antidote for his condition. Using improvised laboratory equipment and every remaining amount of a rare plant extract, he attempts to synthesize a serum. Throughout this process, he communicates online with George Tarleton of Advanced Idea Mechanics, who advises him to use a higher concentration of the plant compound and encourages him to try. Bruce manages to produce a serum and tests it on a sample of his own blood. At first, the gamma mutation in the blood appears to diminish as the green coloring fades. However, moments later, the blood cells rupture and are destroyed. The experiment is another failure, and Bruce has no remaining plant material to attempt it again. Bruce informs Tarleton of the result and explains that he cannot repeat the experiment. Tarleton responds by stating that continuing to live with gamma exposure may be more dangerous than the risks of meeting in person, and presses to speak face-to-face. Bruce refuses, concerned that General Ross would track him if he traveled. Tarleton then suggests that Bruce send him a blood sample instead. Bruce eventually agrees and sends a sample. A few days later, Tarleton contacts him with preliminary findings. There are signs of gamma reduction, but the data is incomplete. In order to formulate a viable antidote, Tarleton needs detailed information related to Project Gamma Pulse. Bruce realizes that this information is stored in Las Vegas. He replies that retrieving it would be impossible. Later, Bruce lies down on the small bed in the trailer, trying to rest. Sleep does not come. Instead, visions of destruction and violence caused during his transformations overwhelm him. Anxiety builds until the change begins again. He attempts to fight it, but he has no control. Realizing what is about to happen, he urgently tells Rick to leave and get as far away as possible. Rick refuses at first, but Bruce, in the midst of losing control, forces him out. Rick runs from the trailer. Before he can get far, he is intercepted by General Ross and Blonsky, who have arrived with a full military battalion equipped with tanks and heavy weapons. Ross presses Rick to bring Bruce out and surrender. Betty attempts to intervene, arguing with her father that what happened to Bruce was the result of an accident, not any intentional wrongdoing. The argument escalates, revealing deep emotional and philosophical conflict between them about responsibility, blame, and the nature of what Bruce has become. Meanwhile, Rick is held at gunpoint by Blonsky, who insists that Bruce and Rick must have coordinated the Gamma incident together, treating Rick as an accomplice rather than a witness or victim. The Hulk bursts out of the trailer with overwhelming force, launching himself into the air and landing directly among the military vehicles. The Humvees open fire, but the bullets have no effect, bouncing harmlessly off his skin. However, the persistent attack only enrages him further. In his fury, the Hulk tears through the vehicles, overturning one Humvee with ease. He moves toward a nearby rock, seizes a second Humvee, and smashes it repeatedly against the rock until the vehicle is reduced to twisted metal. The soldiers, unable to stop him and faced with his overwhelming strength, fall back and scatter. Seeing his forces unable to contain Banner, General Ross deploys Emil Blonsky. Blonsky launches tear gas grenades to obscure the Hulk's vision, then maneuvers directly beneath the giant, firing up at him from close range. The assault only intensifies the Hulk's rage, and he attempts to crush Blonsky. Blonsky narrowly avoids being killed and retreats when ordered, drawing the Hulk into pursuit. As the Hulk charges after him, the soldiers activate Stark's sonic cannons, experimental crowd control weapons developed by Stark Industries. The focused sonic waves strike the Hulk, forcing him to his knees as the sound causes intense pain and disorientation. During this moment of forced submission, Betty calls out to him, calling him Bruce. The sound of her voice cuts through the sonic barrage and triggers a surge of determination. The Hulk grabs a large piece of metal debris and uses it as a shield to block the sonic waves. He then hurls himself forward, destroying one of the cannons, and leaps upward to bring down the second and final device. After the sonic cannons are destroyed, Blonsky advances toward the Hulk despite General Ross ordering him to stand down. Blonsky deliberately provokes the Hulk, challenging him directly. In response, the Hulk delivers a single devastating kick that sends Blonsky crashing into a large rock, severely injuring him and shattering most of the bones in his body. The Hulk then continues moving through the battlefield. At this point, Betty and Rick approach him without fear, trying to calm him and bring him back from his rage, attempting to help him revert to Bruce. The Hulk's aggression begins to subside in their presence. Just as the transformation begins to loosen and his anger drops, General Ross intervenes. He orders a helicopter to open fire, placing both Betty and Rick in danger as they stand beside the Hulk. In response, the Hulk uses the metal shard he still carries as a weapon to strike the helicopter, causing it to fall from the sky. As it crashes and explodes, he shields Betty and Rick from the blast with his own body. General Ross watches this happen in stunned disbelief. Betty is rendered unconscious in the chaos. The Hulk gathers her into his arms, taking great care with her despite his size and strength. With Rick accompanying him, the Hulk flees the battlefield entirely. The Hulk travels through the forest with fluid, inhuman ease, moving quickly despite the darkness and uneven terrain. Betty remains unconscious in his arms, while Rick holds onto his shoulder, overwhelmed and silent. Eventually, the Hulk reaches a secluded cave, deep, hidden, and naturally fortified. He enters and carefully places Betty on the ground. He gathers moss and leaves to form a soft resting place for her before stepping back. Rick dismounts shakily, his legs barely supporting him. Outside, thunder rolls and rain begins to fall. The Hulk positions himself near the entrance, watching the storm while remaining alert. Rick stays beside Betty, checking her condition. She is breathing steadily, simply unconscious. Rick notes that she will recover and acknowledges that the Hulk protected her. The Hulk shows no verbal response, but his posture eases slightly, indicating some internal shift. The three of them rest in the cave while the storm rages outside. Rick eventually succumbs to exhaustion and falls asleep, while the Hulk stays awake, keeping watch and ensuring their safety. During this quiet moment, the Hulk turns inward. He becomes aware of himself and what he has done, horrified by the destruction and violence that surround his existence. In his mind, he enters a void-like space where Bruce manifests before him. Bruce confronts the Hulk, insisting that the Hulk is dangerous and responsible for the loss of lives. The Hulk insists in return that he acted out of necessity and had no other options. Bruce argues that his life is ruined because of the Hulk and that normalcy is no longer possible. He expresses that he cannot continue like this and that finding a cure is the only path forward. Betty wakes to morning light entering the cave. She is confused at first, but then everything comes back to her: the battle, the explosion, the Hulk. She sits up too quickly and becomes dizzy. Rick, already awake nearby, notes that she was injured during the chaos. Bruce, now returned from his transformed state, lies on the cave floor without clothing, shivering from cold and exhaustion. Rick removes his jacket and places it over him. Betty studies him more closely now that the immediate danger is gone. She recognizes that he's younger than she first assumed. Not much more than a teenager, but carrying the look of someone who has been forced to grow up too fast. She recalls the reports she read at the base: the breach, the car, the alarms. Rick Jones, detained for trespassing, suspected of being involved in something larger. Now he's here, in the middle of a classified military hunt involving a gamma-mutated superhuman. It makes no sense that someone his age should be caught in something like this. Rick sits with an uneasy stillness, aware that she is evaluating him. He doesn't try to defend himself or explain. The exhaustion on him is clear: the bruises, the dirt, the fear that hasn't finished leaving his body. Betty recognizes it. He has the look of someone who has spent a long time surviving instead of living. She understands the type: a kid who fell through the cracks, found the wrong group, and didn't see a way out. She wonders if someone like that can be trusted, not out of suspicion but genuine concern. Trust, in situations like this, can be the difference between life and death. Bruce slowly regains consciousness and steps in before any unspoken judgment settles. He explains Rick's involvement for what it truly is: not a plan, not conspiracy, but a young person pushed into a dangerous circle and trying to escape it. Bruce makes clear that Rick helped him when he didn't have to, that he chose compassion even when he was afraid. Betty watches Bruce as he says this, recognizing the sincerity in him. Bruce is not a man who trusts easily now. If he trusts Rick, there's a reason. Bruce tries to understand the aftermath and asks if the Hulk hurt anyone. Rick explains that the Hulk destroyed vehicles and inflicted severe injuries on Blonsky, but did not take any lives. Betty adds that the Hulk acted to protect both of them several times and likely save their lives. Bruce struggles with this. He expresses fear that the Hulk is becoming stronger and more volatile, and believes it is only a matter of time before true harm occurs. Betty challenges this assumption, pointing out that the Hulk acted as a protector rather than a destroyer. Bruce is unsure how to respond. Betty describes what she witnessed: the Hulk shielding them from the exploding helicopter, carrying them to safety, and remaining through the night to watch over them. Her interpretation is that the Hulk acted as a guardian. This leads Bruce into a moment of introspection. He explains that the idea of a guardian figure goes back to his childhood. He describes his father, Brian Banner, the abuse that shaped him, the trauma of witnessing his mother's death, and the imaginary protector he created in his mind, a being strong enough to defend him when he could not defend himself. Now, that imagined figure has manifested in reality through the Gamma transformation. After he finishes recounting this history, there's a heavy silence shared among the three of them. Rick is the one who eventually asks what Bruce intends to do next. Bruce says he must continue searching for a cure. He mentions a possible lead, George Tarleton, who leads advanced idea mechanics in Las Vegas, and may have the scientific knowledge required to engineer a counteragent to gamma radiation. Betty points out the difficulty of this plan. Las Vegas is a great distance away, and General Ross has full military resources actively searching for Bruce. Bruce acknowledges the danger, but insists he must keep trying. He says he cannot continue living in this state, and he cannot risk the safety of those he cares about. He looks directly at Betty when saying this. Betty meets his gaze and suggests that perhaps the greatest danger does not come from the Hulk, but instead from what her father is willing to do in order to capture him. Bruce has no response to that. The medical wing at Gamma Base is quiet except for the soft hum of machines. Emil Blonsky lies immobilized in traction, his entire body supported and restrained by braces, casts, and wrapped bandages. His injuries are extensive, every rib broken, multiple fractures in his spine, internal bleeding severe enough that most patients would not have survived. The doctors have called his survival a miracle. General Ross enters the medical wing and approaches Blonsky's bed. Blonsky acknowledges him with strained humor, comparing the state of his body to being struck by the Hulk. He reflects aloud on the encounter with the Hulk, recalling the overwhelming physical presence and raw power he faced. Instead of fear, he describes the sensation with fascination, even admiration. The experience of seeing and feeling that kind of strength leaves a deep impression. He suggests that the Hulk did not act without restraint, that the creature was in control enough to choose not to kill them. Ross remains still for a moment before responding. He then shares information that he has kept guarded. He tells Blonsky about Bruce Banner's father, Brian Banner, a man of exceptional intellect whose mind deteriorated under his own brilliance. Ross describes Brian's instability, his violent behavior, and ultimately the murder of Bruce's mother. Ross explains that he worked closely with Brian, saw the destructive potential of brilliance unrestrained, and made a personal vow never to let another Banner inflict that kind of harm again. He believed Bruce was different, more stable, more compassionate, until the gamma detonation and the emergence of the Hulk. Ross suggests that Bruce is following the same tragic path as his father. That power is corrupting him in the same way intellect once corrupted Brian. Ross turns the conversation toward focus and urgency. He tells Blonsky that Bruce currently has Betty with him, and Ross will not allow his daughter to be endangered by another Banner, whether through madness or monstrosity. He needs Blonsky recovered and ready to return to the field. Bruce, Rick, and Betty arrive in Las Vegas and are brought into George Tarleton's laboratory at AIM. As they walk with Tarleton and several AIM scientists, Tarleton speaks openly about his fascination with Bruce, surprised that someone who appears so ordinary can contain such an immense level of gamma energy within his body. They learn that Tarleton has already developed a potential antidote, one that could either cure Bruce entirely or temporarily reverse only the transformation. However, Tarleton makes it clear that the procedure comes with significant risks. To evaluate the antidote's effectiveness, Bruce must transform into the Hulk during the procedure. If the dose is too weak, the Hulk will re-emerge and cause widespread destruction. If the dose is too strong, it could kill Bruce. Despite the danger, Bruce decides to proceed. He is restrained and becomes visibly tense as AIM scientists prepare the equipment, which is unstable enough that some of them resort to physically striking parts of the machinery to make it function properly. Betty and Rick stay close, trying to reassure him as the team finalizes their setup. The experiment begins. Tarleton administers an electrical stimulus directly to Bruce's head to provoke the transformation. The reaction is immediate and violent as Bruce's body shifts into the Hulk. Tarleton watches with intense fascination as the transformation unfolds, captivated by the raw power being unleashed. During the procedure, the Hulk's agitation increases, and in a struggle to break free from the restraints, he inadvertently knocks George Tarleton aside. Rick and Betty rush forward and climb onto the Hulk's chest, attempting to steady him and keep him calm long enough for the procedure to continue. Their presence and efforts create just enough of an opening for Tarleton to recover and administer the antidote. The formula takes effect. For the first time, Bruce is able to exert conscious control while in Hulk form. Shortly afterward, the transformation reverses and the Hulk returns to Bruce. Tarleton is exhilarated by the result, celebrating the success and remarking that none of his previous subjects had survived similar testing. When Betty asks what he means by previous subjects, Tarleton explains that he had used Bruce's blood to create a larger supply of gamma-alter material, believing it could be applied to benefit humanity. However, because the subjects were not given Bruce's unique myostatic primer, the biological factor that allows his cells to absorb radiation rather than be destroyed by it, the prior experiments resulted in their deaths. Bruce is horrified by this revelation and deeply concerned about the implications of the blood supply being used by others. He urges Tarleton to destroy all the samples immediately, fearing that such power could easily fall into the wrong hands. especially if the government were to learn of its existence. As Tarleton begins to argue that Bruce is overreacting and that the government has no such designs, Bruce is suddenly struck in the back by a tranquilizer dart. He collapses to the floor as a result. General Ross' snipers have taken a shot. Moments later, Emil Blonsky enters the laboratory with military forces behind him. Blonsky attempts to force his own transformation, but before he can act, he is restrained by his fellow soldiers. Blonsky eventually learns that George Tarleton has been conducting extensive experiments using Bruce Banner's blood. Tarleton has been trying to determine how Bruce survived the gamma exposure and how that ability might be replicated in others. At the moment Blonsky finds him, Tarleton is being questioned by a soldier, Kathleen Dare. Blonsky approaches from behind and strikes Kathleen on the back of the head, knocking her unconscious. He remarks, without concern, that he found her irritating. Tarleton, unsettled, asks why Blonsky resorts to physical violence so readily. Blonsky responds by drawing a gun and aiming it directly at Tarleton. Tarleton begins asking what he could have done to warrant such a threat. Blonsky states his intention clearly. He wants the Hulk's power for himself, believing Tarleton has already learned how to remove it from Bruce. Tarleton admits that witnessing Bruce's transformation into the Hulk was awe-inspiring, something he describes as both magnificent and godlike. Blonsky insists that this is precisely what he wants for himself. He is tense, sweating, and increasingly unstable, claiming he needs this power. Tarleton hesitates and warns Blonsky that because he does not know what substances are currently active in Blonsky's bloodstream, introducing Bruce's gamma-altered blood could yield unpredictable and catastrophic results. He explains that such a combination could create something monstrous, an abomination. This warning enrages Blonsky. He puts his gun away, grabs Tarleton by the front of his shirt, and lifts him into the air with a single arm, demonstrating that the super soldier serum has already altered him significantly. Tarleton insists that he has always intended to help and has never refused. Blonsky then undergoes violent mutation. His bones elongate and tear through his skin as his body grows rapidly in size and mass. Tarleton frantically tries to halt the process, recognizing that what he feared is now occurring. The unknown elements in Blonsky's system have combined with the gamma-based material, transforming him fully into the creature that will become known as the Abomination. Despite Tarleton's warnings and attempts to intervene, the newly formed Abomination does not listen. He breaks free and escapes the facility. Bruce, Betty, and Rick are loaded onto a helicopter and taken into custody. Ross makes it clear that he anticipated their movements. He had been monitoring communications and tracking any possible route they might attempt. He explains that Bruce may be intelligent, but lacks the training to effectively evade pursuit, and that once Betty stole a vehicle, he knew exactly where they intended to go. Betty tries to speak to him, but Ross interrupts. He informs her that she is also under arrest for assisting Bruce for stealing military equipment and, in his view, for betraying him personally. The emotional weight of this accusation is evident. Betty fires back, accusing Ross of endangering her life by opening fire during the confrontation, prioritizing capturing Bruce over her safety. Ross responds fiercely, claiming that he was trying to prevent her from repeating the mistake he made with Bruce's father. Ross insists that he once trusted Brian Banner too much and allowed Brian's intelligence to overshadow his instability and capacity for harm. Ross now believes Bruce is following the same trajectory, that he is brilliant but fundamentally unstable and destined to become dangerous. Bruce steps into the argument with a controlled and deliberate tone. He acknowledges that there are similarities between himself and his father, but he reframes the comparison. Brian Banner became a monster because he tried to destroy the parts of himself that were compassionate and vulnerable. Bruce suggests that Ross, out of fear, is doing the same, trying to eliminate any possibility of danger by suppressing empathy and trust. Bruce points out that Ross worked closely with Brian and understood both his genius and his flaws. He argues that Ross is now repeating the same cycle that destroyed Brian's family, sacrificing emotional bonds in the pursuit of control and safety. Bruce warns Ross that this path will ultimately cost him his relationship with Betty. Ross is visibly shaken by this, his certainty faltering as he looks at his daughter. Betty's expression shows both anger and pain, a mixture that suggests the damage to their relationship is already deep. Before the confrontation can continue, the moment is interrupted by a report coming through the helicopter's radio. News reaches the helicopter that a creature identified as the Hulk is attacking Las Vegas. However, it quickly becomes clear that the being in question is not Bruce, but Emil Blonsky, who has undergone a violent mutation. Blonsky forced George Tarleton to inject him with Bruce's gamma-altered blood, and the combination of that blood with the unstable super-soldier serum already in his system resulted in his transformation into a massive creature that becomes known as the Abomination. Bruce recognizes immediately that Blonsky is responsible and understands that he is the only one with the capability to confront him. He explains to General Ross and Betty that although he cannot fully control the Hulk, he believes he can direct the Hulk's strength towards stopping Abomination and protecting the people in danger. Ross orders the helicopter to prepare for landing, but Bruce argues against it. He insists that the helicopter must remain airborne so that he can jump from it, both to avoid endangering the others and to use the fall itself to provoke the transformation. Rick tries to intervene, expressing fear that the cure may have removed Bruce's ability to transform. Bruce responds that regardless of the risk, he must attempt it, as the lives of soldiers and civilians depend on stopping Abomination. Bruce and Betty share a kiss before he throws himself from the helicopter. At first, he realizes the transformation is not occurring, and he faces the possibility of dying upon impact. However, the terror of the fall triggers the change just in time, and Bruce transforms into the Hulk moments before striking the ground below. The streets of Las Vegas are chaotic, with civilians fleeing in every direction. Rising to his full height, the Hulk releases a thunderous roar that draws the attention of Abomination. Blonsky, seeing it as a chance to prove his superiority, the two charge toward each other with overwhelming force. When they collide, Abomination's greater size and strength give him the advantage. He counters Hulk's initial strike and throws him across the street. The blow stuns Hulk, and he struggles to regain his footing while Abomination mocks him, relishing the pain he inflicts. Abomination forces Hulk against a wall and drives a bony protrusion at his elbow into Hulk's chest. In that moment, Bruce briefly surfaces within the Hulk, overwhelmed by the impossibility of defeating his opponent. Abomination taunts him further, threatening to make him watch Betty die. Hulk is nearly beaten, and Abomination turns his focus toward the helicopter carrying Betty, Rick, and General Ross. He prepares to kill them, raising a length of chain and a concrete pillar as weapons. As Abomination pauses, offering the victims a chance to speak before he strikes, Hulk rises again. Drawing on sheer resolve, he slams the ground with enough force to crack and collapse the street, trapping one of Abomination's legs. The momentum causes the chain to whip into the air and coil around Abomination's neck. Hulk positions himself to crush Abomination's throat and end the battle permanently. However, Betty intervenes, stopping him before he kills Blonsky. Hulk halts his finishing blow and instead releases a final, triumphant roar, a declaration of victory rather than destruction. With Abomination defeated, the Hulk slows his breathing. The city around him is devastated, shattered storefronts, wrecked cars, collapsed concrete, but the civilians remain alive. He has prevented the worst outcome. The transformation begins to reverse. Bruce Banner ends up kneeling amidst the rubble, unclothed, exhausted, and barely conscious. The sound of arriving aircraft fills the air. Several Shield Quinjets descend, agents rappelling to the ground and forming a perimeter. Kate Waynesboro approaches him without drawing her weapon, carrying a blanket. General Ross forces his way through the agents, furious, claiming Bruce remains a military fugitive. A calm voice interrupts the confrontation. Nick Fury steps out of one of the Quinjets, observing the scene. He states that all charges against Bruce Banner were dismissed moments earlier by direct presidential order. Ross reacts with anger and disbelief, questioning the decision. Fury explains that the president has seen the footage. Abomination, a creation of the super soldier program under Ross's oversight, endangered hundreds of civilians, while Bruce, despite his condition, stopped him. The threat originated from Ross's project. Bruce prevented a catastrophe. Ross processes this. He looks at Betty, who will not look back, and then at Bruce, who regards him not with triumph, but with a quiet, weary sympathy. Ross turns away and leaves. Fury then speaks with Bruce, assuring him they will move him to a secure location. Bruce expresses doubt that safety is possible anywhere in his presence. Fury counters that Bruce displayed intentional control and protected lives, demonstrating that he is not simply a danger, but someone capable of directing immense power responsibly. Fury extends his hand to Bruce, telling him that this is exactly the type of individual they need. Bruce accepts the handshake, confused and uncertain, and asks what Fury means. A SHIELD Quinjet lands at a secluded facility deep in the wilderness of British Columbia. Bruce exits the aircraft, still visibly worn from the events in Las Vegas. Kate Waynesboro guides him inside. Bruce asks about the absence of personnel. Kate explains that there are no additional staff present. The site is classified and off the record, known only to a handful of individuals. They enter a large laboratory space where a man stands with his back turned to them. He is tall and physically strong, and when he turns, Bruce notices his striking green hair. The man introduces himself as Dr. Leonard Sampson. He greets Bruce with a handshake, identifying himself as someone who was also affected by gamma radiation during the original bomb test. Sampson explains that he was in the control room the day Bruce went out to save Rick Jones, calling the act reckless yet courageous. Sampson offers Bruce a seat, observing that he is physically depleted. Bruce acknowledges this and explains that he was told Sampson might be able to help him. Sampson confirms that he has spent the last year researching the effects of gamma radiation, primarily through studying his own condition. He displays holographic data showing biological differences between his exposure and Bruce's. Bruce's mutation was caused by direct, full-body gamma exposure, whereas Sampson's exposure was reduced by the shielding systems he activated during the blast. Despite these differences, both transformations originate from the same event. Sampson then presents neurological information and proposes a direction for the work ahead. His goal is not to eradicate or suppress the Hulk, but to understand the Hulk's nature, to determine why the transformation occurs and what it represents psychologically and physiologically. He tells Bruce that the Hulk is not his enemy. Bruce considers this, taking in Sampson's commitment and the possibility of guidance from someone who has shared a similar burden. He agrees to begin the work.